My grandfather told me once that there are always reasons why people can't do things. They don't have enough time, or they don't have enough money, or the person who used to do the thing that they now have to do was better at it than they are. Yeah, he added 2 facts after that statement. Number 1 is they were real reasons, real obstacles, real barriers. They weren't made up, they weren't fake. But he did add, it's important then, knowing that, to go ahead and do it anyway. Intimidating philosophy, maybe a little daunting, but I also find it a little bit hopeful. Well, this, as always, of course, is the Wiseman Method podcast. I'm Dwight Hurst, and glad to have you along as we ask and answer these questions. Today, I was able to sit down with Claire Wiseman and David Livingston and talk about barriers, about obstacles to getting sober and starting out your journey towards treatment. It is our hope that as we ask the question, what are the barriers that keep people from treatment, that you may sit down and listen to this, and whether it affects you directly or someone that you love, we hope that by trying to answer this question and provide some of our experience and feelings about it, that you might find some motivation and some hope to be able to move forward and to move through those barriers, to find health and sobriety in your own path. And I'm excited to talk about this. We're talking the barriers to treatment. There's lots to go into. What do you think stop people from starting? Stop from starting. There we go. What are some things that keep people from beginning to get into treatment?
I think from what I hear, at least, is starts with fear. Number of different fears. Fears of suffering. Fears of not succeeding. Fear of not being able to handle life on life's terms. Fear of succeeding and then relapsing. So I think number 1 is fear, period.
That's a good way to frame it when you think about that not just the fear of life without a substance, but what do I do even if I succeed? Like if I have something going well, then how long will it go well before it goes badly?
Correct. And if things are not going well, is the world going to expect it to start going well just because I received treatment? Am I going to be a productive person in society? Am I going to succeed doing so?
I mean, I think fear is a big part of our lives in as a motivator anyway, right? But I think fear is a big part of addiction and that addictive process. I find people are already either they're prone to some anxiety or there is that fear of failure, fear of letting people down. And that really contributes to that cycle of addiction, right? Because then, especially when I continue to use and I continue to give into like addictive impulses, that's also where people will hide that. They'll hide it when they're not having the success and progress too, because that lets people down once again, right?
What needs to get kind of worked through and worked out in treatment is how to have a relationship with our fear, that's healthy, meaning that it's, fear's the most inhibitory process we have. When we feel deep fear, people put the brakes on. And so, if you fear your use of substance, it's one of the greatest strengths that you can have in overcoming the addiction. If you don't fear it, it's far easier to just continue the path. So there's a lot of confusion, as Claire was pointing out, over what to fear and what not to fear. Like the vulnerability, one of the things that treatment's supposed to help people with in therapy as well is to understand that vulnerability is a human process. None of us escape it. And that you don't actually have to fear it. If you can have a relationship with it and get to know it and get to know your fear, how it's helping you, how it's not helping you, you really begin to move into a more creative mode, right? Because then you can think about these parts of yourself. And when you can think about them, parse them, understand how they're helping, not helping, you move into a creative process. Then you can make decisions and just start to move forward, hopefully.
I like how you mentioned that the fear of use or the fear of the substance can sometimes aid in recovery. Is that how you said that? So you could see it either way. Usually we focus on the fear of being without or the fear of sobriety. But you're talking about how there's sometimes is a healthy fear as well that can drive a healthy behavior.
David, is it a healthy
100%.
fear or is it a healthy amount of fear?
That's a good question.
Right. I mean, it depends, right? That's one of the things you have to parse. If you're terrified of using again because it's dangerous and it's sidetracking your life and you can feel the fear of what that's doing to you, the chances of you using again go way, way down. Right. And often when I ask somebody, like, do you fear if you're using the substance, do you feel fear? They say, no, that's a bad sign. That often when people come to treatment and make a decision to come in, they're fed up, and two, they're finally feeling afraid of the way that the substance is leading their life. And so those two factors kick in, and then they're motivated to move into a healthier place. And so keeping those feelings alive at a level that doesn't, like you're saying, you don't want to feel in so much fear that you can't, be effective and think things through and understand things and move in the world. But enough fear around the things that are truly dangerous is useful.
I agree. A healthy amount of fear in life. I think as a child, we learn, when we're 2 or 3, what fear is. It's a uncomfortable feeling, but is one necessary to keep us, safe from dangers, from threats. So I think as a little child, as I was saying, when you learn what fear is, then you fear everything because it overwhelms you. But as we grow up and mature, we have to be able to control our fear to keep it at a healthy level. So still will keep us, safe from putting ourselves at risk, but is not going to stop us from having a productive life. So it's truly finding a balance.
When it comes to issues of fear and even issues of anxiety, I, a long time ago, worked at a place where we would talk about that kind of level of like 0 to 10, right? You can rate your levels of fear of something, like, or even your levels of anxiety that you're feeling with something at a 0 to 10. And I think one of the healthy things to expect or to learn to expect is that I really shouldn't be at a 0, just like I would hopefully not be at a 10 all the time. But really a 0 is quite rare as well, especially if I'm doing anything worth doing. And sometimes I like to think of it as really if I'm at a 5 or below on a level of how intimidating something is or how strong my emotional reaction is to something. If I'm at a 5 or below, I'm probably still capable of making some decisions and engaging with it. And, if I'm above a 5 or I'm getting up closer to 10, that's probably where I need to be a little more focused on the emotional state of being also to make sure that I'm not in a panic, that I'm not making bad decisions, and I think when we're at that status, you get up to say, if I'm at a 7 out of 10, if I'm a self-evaluating as a 7 out of 10, I'm probably pretty wound up. I probably need to be a little bit careful of my emotional state about what decisions I'm going to make. And
I think that's the difference of fear and phobia right there. Is the 7 to 10, right?
Oh, that's a good differentiation. Yeah. Yeah, say a little more. Would you talk a little more about that? What you feel is that difference with fear and phobia?
I think a phobia is something that stops you from doing something healthy that is productive because you see a danger, imminent danger that might come with it. It's often overinflated, and it just absorb every, cell in your body where you become almost unable of proceeding. So, It could be it's an overwhelming fear of anxiety. It creates panic. You feel like running. It's again, mostly the level of it is unreal, and it's harmful in so many ways, not just on your day-to-day life, but not being able to control that. It's unhealthy for your future as you grow, mature as an adult, and create solid things that you can rely on.
Well, and when it boils down to, when we look at the element that fear plays in a barrier to getting treatment, I often have noticed that when someone's in an active period of use, when it comes to addiction or dependence, they spend a lot of time in a panic mode. There's a lot of times practically to be worried about and kind of managing risk, because I've got to procure the drugs and use that, and I've got to be careful, especially if it's opiates that we're talking about. And I'm careful about relapse. I'm careful not to go too long with, I should say, careful of relapse, careful of overdose, usually worried about that, and at the same time trying to avoid the withdrawals and avoid detection. There's a lot of that. And then there's just the aggravation to the nervous system in general, to where people spend a lot of time in that fight or flight, and that really becomes a barrier to being able to really accomplish anything, let alone start the project of recovery and treatment.
Yes. And David, do you remember when we spoke about, what I see, Dwight, especially the people I speak to, and they tell me all the reasons why they should put this off and come in later. There is and maybe David will be able to express this a little more than I will. There is a disconnection of thought. A lot of different things becomes confused and temporary, not long enough for an action. Can you explain a little? Do you know what I'm talking about, David?
Yes, I do. So what happens is when there's a huge amount of anxiety, which can become a form of, at its worst, when there's that much fear inside, it's an acute type of anxiety. It can move people into a kind of fight or flight, which often they freeze, right? They just kind of shut down. And it can also create some form of like paranoia, because what happens is when we feel so much distress or fear inside, what we do naturally, and we're not even aware of it most of the time, is we look outside. So the fear must be outside, because if I'm this afraid, there must be a reason for it. But if I'm laying in bed all day and not doing anything, then it must be, and I'm thinking about getting into treatment, the treatment must be terrifyingly dangerous because I'm feeling all this fear about it. So there's this confusion over the intensity of the feeling that someone has inside and what the reality actually is outside. So I know that when I talk to people about coming in for treatment and they're really nervous or this, part of what I do is break it all down, right? As you start to parse so that the inside and the outside start to get differentiated, right? So it may be that, it isn't that there isn't any discomfort or challenges in a treatment or getting detox. There are. But once they're recognized for what they are, they're really talked through, and you can get a sense of them, and you can separate the feeling from that's going on inside you from the reality outside you, you begin to feel like you can move again. And then people are actually usually relieved that you'll see almost an immediate downturn in their anxiety, right? Well, they'll feel like, oh, okay, so someone has just explained to me in a way that makes sense what it is I'm afraid of. And so it isn't that there isn't any reason for the fear or concern. There is some, but it's so overblown, and that's been parsed. And then they relax inside. They can move again in the world, and things start to get better. So it's I think we have to continually, I feel like it's part of what I try to do is just break this down into small pieces, and then it feels more manageable.
It's interesting, as one of the things that we're looking at for today, as far as one of the questions answer about barriers of treatment is how to help people to lower their obstacles. How, if I have a loved one who is resistant or maybe they have obstacles to entering treatment, how can I help them? And that just stood out to me as you were saying. Part of that is acknowledging that some fear is grounded, that there are fears that are there. They may be amplified, but to say, you know, if I can listen to what someone's obstacles are, that's already a big chunk of the battle of helping someone to overcome their barriers to treatment, is to acknowledge that, yes, you have them, and it's okay. If you're afraid, for example, some of your fears are justified. I'm not going to start by telling you you're wrong, but then also by listening, you can come back around and share, as you were talking about, share some of that insight of being able to calm some of that down too.
100%, right? So if you're trying to help someone get into treatment and you do some of the research and you call and talk to someone on the phone and you have them talk to the person who's interested in coming in, then all of a sudden it's like questions are getting answered, concerns are getting dealt with in a way in which there's an answer to them, and the way forward starts to get laid out. It doesn't feel like this kind of mass of anxiety or concern that isn't parsed and where there's literally a step, a way forward. And then what happens is when people can see the way forward, they're able to move a lot quicker. So yes, to what both of you are saying,
there's like a sense of hope then, potential. That's to me anyway. That's the word that came to my mind, was hope. When you said, when you see a way forward, that's a specific type of hope. Because if I can start to have a plan, planning is a thing that's very intimidating when I don't know where the road is going.
But again,
that's
Dwight,
right.
I think on all the things you were saying about that plan, the families have to remember as well that, you're speaking to somebody that their thought process has been compromised. Because I think people get very frustrated, and they said, at least, when they call us here, they said they were going to, and now they don't know if they want to, and now they're scared of the hospital, and they're scared of COVID, they're scared of the sedation, all these things. I mean, you're talking about somebody that is actually, using fentanyl and buying from somebody in the street that God knows where he came from, a Chinese lab or a Mexican lab. So again, it takes a lot of work, patience, tolerance of the family member to understand those fears, to filter those fears into things that are actual realities and things that are just inflating that irrational fear for fear on getting off drugs in the first place. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. There's the underlying, a lot of times when there's something healthy that's also scary or intimidating, it's easy to find lots of obstacles. They're like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And, as we're talking about fear, I'm going to say, and I know anxiety is kind of the worry, the excessive worry portion of that too. And as I see that usually triggers people to go, well, let me plan. And I'm not going to just ABC plan. I'm going to A sub possibility 1, possibility sub 1A. I'm just going to, in my mind, can go down 53 different little rabbit holes and say, here's all of the possible bad things that can happen.
Correct.
And it can really amplify that to where you can really overthink. Yeah. Yeah. I find that if someone's goal is to be ready to do something, let's say if I'm trying to get ready to enter to detox and to do treatment, and I wait until I'm ready, and I have some vague idea in my head of what being ready means, and I may never do it. I always like to try to talk about being ready enough. It's like being ready enough to jump off of a diving board. I'd like to make sure there's water underneath me, but really I can't plan exactly what's going to happen without having the experience. So it's like am I ready enough to take the step? That's the only thing I need to be ready enough for. And sometimes that change in perspective can make a difference, that I don't have to be ready. I just have to be ready enough.
Right. No, that makes sense. Right. Tremendous sense.
Yeah, right. It's never going to be, you're right. Because there's always going to be some ambivalence, right? Yeah. That the ability to understand, like one of the hallmarks of maturity is ability to tolerate ambivalence, meaning that nothing's perfect. There's always things we like and things we don't like in everything. But, so the good enough idea is just kind of allows us to kind of then, like we're talking about, kind of parse and then decide where we want to, okay, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and I think one of the big obstacles both to entering treatment and to having empathy for those that have not had the addiction struggles and they're trying to support a friend or family member or loved one, it's difficult to understand the different perspectives of what does it really mean to get sober. We tend to think of it as, oh, I'll get this treatment and then everything's going to be great because I'll be healthy. And that's a very simplistic way to look at it. And if people have tried it all before, they know that getting into treatment and being sober is not, especially not immediately, wonderful.
It's not just simplistic, but I think that is a tremendous amount of responsibility put on the shoulders of the person getting treatment. Mm-hmm. The family expects this person to come back doing absolutely wonderful, with plans for their future, with, a stable place of mind. There's such expectation that it causes frustration. It caused, the feeling of failure. I failed you, where they did not. There is a process. There is a process, and everybody speed through that process is different.
Yeah.
And the expectations of family are so unreal that they are detrimental to the person coming home.
When we have stopped having what might be our primary way of coping with stress, even if it was killing us, we've now stopped it, and we get into a situation where everyone's like, okay, mission accomplished. And it's like, actually, no, like mission begun, One of the things that we can forget is that we all cope with life in different ways. And I think if the way that people cope hasn't been destructive to their life and their health, and it isn't illegal, maybe they do whatever they do. They have a hobby or something. Maybe they do it a little too much. Maybe they still, aren't completely healthy in how they manage it, but they've never had to really look at it because it isn't drugs. It isn't alcohol. Nobody's going to die or lose a job or get a criminal citation for it. So they've never really had to think about what would they do without it. If you couldn't have your, that racquetball game or whatever, and then tell me that my life is wonderful now that I stopped doing it. And there's that component people have to be aware of, I think, when someone's trying to be sober.
And then we come to the realization, what is treatment, and what does treatment is made to provide, or what does treatment really provide? I think there is a misconception of what treatment can actually help the patient with, and what kind of work it is still, waiting to be done. I think, and that's not just the fault of the patient and the family, but from the treatment centers saying, oh, they'll be here for 30 or 90 days, and we're going to work with their addiction and their mental health and find something for them to do. So the families actually sold, this endless pot of gold that is not reality, and I think makes the patient feel like a failure when truly the treatment failed the patient.
It's not as if you go to treatment and then you're cured. That's not true. You can go to treatment and become sober, and in that way, you are certainly better, and you can get time, and you can get detoxed, and all of that in terms of being a goal is achievable, and so that's a possibility. But ultimately, if you're alive, you're going to have anxiety. If you're alive, you're going to have fear, periods of some feeling down, some level of even mild depression. You're going to have all of the elements that come with being alive. You're going to have hopefully successes and certainly some failures and losses. Nobody avoids it. So that ultimately the goal in treatment, like we're kind of all talking about, is to become psychologically minded. Like that when you are afraid, you have a capacity to think about the fear well. Like you can parse it, and you have a way, and if you're struggling with it in a way that you can't get a handle for it, you're not afraid to ask for help for it, because we're all better when we get help. And none of us have it all figured out for ourselves, especially for ourselves. And so it isn't just a kind of a one and out thing. It becomes a mode of living, a mode of being that gets internalized and understood as something to carry forward. And that's how we're healthier. And, and it's, the danger of laying it out like that is it sounds daunting, right? It's like, oh my God, so what is that? I got to do this forever or whatever. When people are in treatment, not like a detox or a long-term treatment, but you can continue therapy 1 hour a week. I mean, you got to exercise more than 1 hour a week to stay in decent shape. It's so, just a way of understanding how to stay healthy is, to me, that's what I sort of, and I think ultimately you're both saying the same thing in your own way. So I just agree.
I like the attitude of health management. That's one of the things I've really learned from talking with you, Claire. And David, you're talking about really the extension of that, which is to say my emotional health is this just one component of any of my other health. We get into a mindset of treatment or sobriety or even health management. If we think of it as an event, we're always going to be disappointed, because to that question that you posed, David, do I have to do this forever? It's like, well, yes, in a way, but what you have to do forever is actually just life. It's just live. And this will be a part of your health management. And certainly that's something we always have to do. And I think that puts it into a less daunting idea to say, oh, this is just part of me living my healthy life.
100%. If I don't exercise enough a week, my anxiety goes up just because of, I need that as just a baseline of helping manage the, and physically having the exertion just relaxes my body. So, I know that, so I do it. And so you create these healthy routines. It's amazing if you can create healthy habits and routines, it's amazing to what degree they can carry your life. And so, treatment is the beginning of I think, establishing some of that.
One of the big questions I was looking forward to talking about was this idea of how can we work with treatment goals when we have a situation where someone's life is busy or overwhelming. I've been thinking about this ever since our one episode where, Claire, you gave an example of someone who might be, say, they have something with maybe someone who's started college, or someone who has something with a deadline attached to it. And the idea of some of the obstacles that keep people from treatment when they have lots of stuff happening in their life. Is it always necessary to say, drop everything for a big intervention right away? And how often does that keep people from doing anything at all?
It is. I think it is, but I think, the situation itself and the risk that the person is in needs to be, evaluated, properly.
Yes.
I think there's should not be one, decision for everybody. If you are, using any kind of substance, you got to drop everything and go into a rehab for 60 days. There's something else too. While some people might need, the long-term treatment, other people might need a detox. And going back to school or whatever they are doing is their best form of therapy, is becoming productive and able to, be emotionally present for a good psychotherapy or even mental health medication, something.
I do sometimes think that, people do limit their own engagement with treatment when they think of it as a kind of an all or nothing option. If I can't just go and be gone for whatever, 60, 90 days or whatever, or dedicate a whole year to a, heavy program, then I just don't do anything at all.
And that keeps important. A lot of people from getting treatment.
Yeah.
See, and David is, sees that quite a bit, where the families say, well, after this, I want them to go into sober living for 6 months, or I want them to go into a rehab for 3 months. And where David's going to say, actually, that's detrimental for this patient, for this situation.
At times it is. It's a long time to leave your life. And then ultimately, whatever you're coming back to, whether it's 2 weeks or 30 days or 6 months, you're still going to have to navigate it when you come back. And how do you look at the potential benefit as compared to the depth of the disruption? Like we're talking about, there's a lot to get thought about and weighed in. There's a lot of people who get involved in drugs and really want off them and just need a process of some accountability. One of the things that I often suggest is that if what you want is accountability, you don't necessarily have to go away somewhere for 6 months. You can do drug testing at home. You can just have somebody drug test them and have someone who knows. And then there's an accountability process. They don't have to give up or disrupt their life entirely. And there's also opioid blockers and things of that nature, which can give added protection and help. So there's a number of different ways that you can actually maybe even strengthen a person's life and sobriety without a disruption that feels so overwhelming that they won't even consider it and then end up in trouble because of it.
Sometimes it's even cost. If they're like, well, I just don't have a ton of money, I don't have good insurance, so I won't even look into it.
Exactly.
Trying to find things and in a way get innovative and creative in programming. Sometimes just gathering information can also help because you're that much closer. It's funny, I think about there were times where I learned this from working in agencies that people would call in and ask for help with something. And there are times where at the point of intake, the person answering the phone or, you look at their referring reason of why they're coming in, and there can be a tendency sometimes to immediately refer. Oh, wait, no, we don't do that here. You got to go there. We don't do that here. You got to go there. Oh, you need this program. No, you're using that much. You should go to a hospital. I think sometimes we overdo that. I've learned personally when, as a private practitioner, when someone calls in to my secretary and they give a little update and they make an appointment, and I look at it and I say, oh, this looks like a pretty hairy situation. I don't know if outpatient counseling is going to be enough. I've learned to always at least have that first appointment and say, so what's going on? Because sometimes it's exactly like what you're talking, David, where it's like, oh, well, if we supplement our in-session work with a few other things, then actually this is something we can do at this level. The risk isn't that high. And other times it is something where they might need to go to somewhere like Wiseman Method and do something more intensive. But then at least we've talked and I've listened, and it's more likely that they're going to say, oh, there are options for me. I don't have to just do one or the other thing or just do nothing at all.
Exactly. And they're looking to connect and really understand and find some way forward. There's so many different options and ideas out there, and a lot of people are confused.
Well, and the idea of everything good that I do equals some result. That's something I really feel like I've learned and picked up from you, David, a lot when we've talked. you often talk about that, how if I can do something little that's healthy, I'll start to feel a little better. It's just like if I do a lot of healthy things, I might feel a lot better.
People don't know how strong they can be. But they really don't, or what they're capable of. And as they have little successes and little successes and little successes, they start to get a feeling for that. And you really can get some momentum. And I remember coming home with this big TV and looking at it with all the wires and everything and thinking, there's no way, I gotta call someone. And then going on the internet, looking up the exact type of TV and seeing how you put it all together. And now I can do that. And I know nothing about that stuff. But for me, that was a big deal, actually, of learning to do something that felt really scary and foreign to me. And it was not nearly as hard as it seemed in my mind.
I wonder if it might be good if each of us picture, let's say if there's somebody listening to us who is saying, I know that I need to get started with some kind of treatment. What's one thing we would say to help them face those obstacles? What do you think, Claire?
I think what type of treatment do you need? Okay. What are we talking about? Yeah. Are we talking about the detoxification to get off the drugs, about mental health? Are we talking about medical mental health? You know, is this somebody that has chemical depression? Is this somebody that will need a psychiatrist to follow? So I think a accurate assessment of the person's history, it's incredibly important. First and foremost, find a professional. And when I say a professional, is not somebody that suffered the same issues. Is a true professional that can assess this person and let's, number one, plan based on their individual needs. And let's really talk about the expectations of each of the treatments. I mean, we are very complex human beings. You can't get a one-stop shop and fix your whole life. So, are you not able to withdraw on your own? Okay, so we need a detox, an effective detox. Not one that punishes you and makes you suffer, but one that is effective and can get you from A to Z. After detox, is your life right now manageable? Are you going to work? Do you have a family? Are things completely out of hand? Have you ever been diagnosed with any mental health issues? And it sounds more complicated than truly is. So going back, what's the first step? The first step is actually identifying a capable professional that can help you plan the right path with you and take a bit of this, the weight of your shoulders.
Great. David, what do you think? Yeah.
Right. I mean, like you're pointing out, Dwight, that somebody who will spend some time and help you think it through, like you do when people call in and you really sort of help them understand their needs and just, so that they can see a process that makes sense to them.
Let me give you a perfect example, Dwight. So yesterday, a mom called here, okay? And what she described regarding her daughter is something that is possibly way beyond what we can provide. Okay?
Yeah.
But I did not cross it out for her and say, no, we can't help you. We can't help your daughter. So what I said to her is, I'm going to give you other options. But if you still want to have an assessment with the medical director and the therapist, we can do an intake. You can talk to them. And there's no commitment from you to us or from us to you. It just gives us all a bit more information to make sure this is, the right path for her or the first step for whatever path she may need. So I said to her, by everything you're saying, it sounds like she's going to need a lot more than we can offer. With that said, we can't make that assessment on a 10-minute call, but this is offered to her. So we never know.
One of the things I would say is that if you're obstacle is the way that you're afraid of being treated, then you need to make sure that you're calling place or finding places that will treat you and evaluate you just the way that Claire's saying.
Correct.
I wouldn't want to, get treatment of any kind from somewhere that gave me an answer in 5 or 10 minutes where they're not really listening to me. And that turns me off. I think anybody being willing to take that step and just finding one thing that they can do, whether it's make that phone call, get some information, that's going to lead to another step. One
of the core fears is that they won't get the right thing, that whatever they decide to do won't be actually right for them, and they won't, and if you can take the time and really try to hear somebody and listen to them, it's a gift, even if you're the right treatment or not the right treatment, just to really hear them and talk to them in a way that makes them feel like you actually understand what their needs are and you're making sense to those needs is immediately helpful.
And we're going to leave it there on that note. I hope that you find some hope that some of the obstacles and barriers that you or your loved ones might face can definitely be pushed through. Please remember to just try something new. If you can do a little, then do a little. If you can do a lot, we'll help you do a lot. If you can do a medium, well, you get the picture. You heard the episode. The Wiseman Method podcast is, as always, brought to you by the Wiseman Method Rapid Detox. You can learn more about us at opiates.com. Follow us on Twitter @opiates, or pick up the phone and dial 1-800-423-2482, and we'd love to answer your questions there on the phone just as much as we love to here on the podcast. The music for our podcast is the song Medical by Clean Mind Sounds. This podcast is produced and edited by Pop Collar Productions, a company specializing in helping you get your podcast off the ground, especially those in the healthcare industry. Basically, if you love to help people, check out popcollar.net and we'll help you set up your show. And we hope that you'll tune in again soon. Keep asking questions, because if you ask questions, you'll find answers, and whenever you can find answers, you can find hope. Bye-bye for now.